Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Plank. I'm the National Disaster Resilience Grant Manager for the City of Minot. Thank you all for attending today to go over our exciting program that we're just implementing into the City of Minot. For those of you that are online, thank you for attending. If you are online, we'd like for you to do some type of emoji, whether it's smiley face, angry, or whatever, so we know how many individuals are out there. We also will have a question and answer session. So for those of you that are online, go ahead and post your comments and your questions. If for some reason we're unable to get those, we will reach out to you and we will post any questions and comments on the City of Minot website under the CDBG link. So we'll have those questions and comments there. Ask that you silence your phone if you're in the audience here. At home, you can answer your phone if you'd like to with that. So a little bit about in 2023, the City of Minot was notified that we were classified as an entitlement city. We do have some requirements that we are required to fulfill in order to that, and yesterday the allocations came out and the City of Minot was awarded $331,580. Now, it may not seem like much, however, Bismarck only received $371,000. So comparable, we did pretty well. I have my consultant here, Elizabeth McNanny from Resource Consultants, to help us develop a 5-year consolidated plan as required by HUD and to help us to identify projects and activities within the City of Minot that this money could be used for. So today she'll do a short presentation regarding the CDBG Community Development and Block Grant Program, some of the requirements, some of the eligible and ineligible activities, and then we can have a discussion about what you, as the public, feel are some of the most pressing issues. There are certain things that we're not able to assist with, and she'll go over a list of that with you. However, it's a time for the public to voice their opinion on how they would like to see this money put towards serving those of low to moderate income individuals. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth McNanny. She is the owner of Resource Consultants, LLC. She has over 16 years of work with the federal government, 10 with HUD. She's assisted multiple communities when developing around 40 to 50 consolidated plans. So we're very lucky to have her here to guide us through the 5-year plan and to help us establish some programs so that we can move forward as a city to assist those who are in need. So Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you.
And I will echo what Chris said. We are really excited to have folks here to provide some input and learn more about the program. Again, I'm Elizabeth McNanny with Resource Consultants. I've been doing this for a while. I love it. This is my first time in Minot, and I am really happy to be here. I also serve on the board for the National Community Development Association, as well as provide services to our clients, my company's clients, and also direct task orders from HUD as it relates to these kinds of programs and treasury programs. So I will jump right into it. This is the presentation that I did Monday night at City Council, which is why it says May 6th. I definitely know it's not May 6th. And I was saying I may not know what date it is, but I know what date it isn't. Oops, did I turn that? Oh, there we go. Okay, an overview of the CDBG program. CDBG's been around for about 50 years. It brought 8 other federal programs together under one umbrella, and it made it a lot easier for communities to access funding because previously you had to apply for up to 8 different small grants to get funding. Now CDBG has primary objectives related to decent housing, a suitable living environment, and expanded economic opportunities, primarily for low and moderate income residents of Minot. Each funded activity must meet a national objective, and those are benefit to low and moderate income individuals, families, or households, depending upon how the activity is structured, aid in the elimination of slum and blight. That's not used as often, and there are strict requirements around that. Or address an urgent need that poses a serious and immediate threat to health and welfare of the community that has happened. That event has to have happened in the last 18 months, and there has to be no other funding available. So prior to using urgent need, a community would never make that determination themselves. HUD will likely call Minot before Minot calls HUD. The core principles, and HUD really looks at this as how to build a successful program. So remembering that these activities must benefit the low and moderate income residents in Minot, community participation, which is part of what we're doing tonight, both online and here in person, leveraging and partners. With $331,580, that's not enough money to solve any one problem within the city. It may be enough to help address something more effectively, and it may lead to leveraging other funds to bring to bear on whatever that issue is. So leveraging and partners are really, really important. And then it's about strategic and targeted investment. With that much money, you would never want to, in a year, fund 8 things, because you can't fund 8 things effectively with the amount of money. And we'll talk about some of the limits on spending for public services and things like that as we go forward through here. The reason I'm here is because HUD places a pretty significant burden on entitlement communities. And by entitlement community, all that means is that the community has reached 50,000 people in Minot's case. There are some other ways to become an entitlement community, but that's how Minot did it. And they anticipate that those communities will create a consolidated plan every 5 years that looks at a housing needs assessment, not the beautiful one that the city has just completed. It's very prescriptive, but we will use some of that as narrative in the document that we submit to HUD, a market analysis, and then a 5-year strategic plan. So what are the big buckets going to be that this money will go into? And as part of the 5-year plan, you have your first year annual action plan. A separate document that HUD requires to be completed is an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. It really is about what affects housing opportunities for federal protected classes in Minot. The way it works is you come up with needs, and that's a legacy kind of thing in the econ planning suite, which is where we put the plan into, and it doesn't inform anything else ever again for the next 5 years. So I suggest that we use HUD's decent housing, suitable living environment, opportunities, expanded opportunities for low and moderate income residents. Then you get to goals, and that's maybe more buckets. It could just be 3. You may just have 3 goals that align with those, but it could be, usually we say 3 to 6. And then the projects. So each project would attach to a goal. And we're going to go through in the next slide what that might look like. The activities are not part of the consolidated plan or even the annual action plan. Activities are the things that you're doing on the ground. So they're the discrete, they call them activities. They're really the discrete projects that you do each year. So you may have a need of decent, affordable housing. A goal would be to increase the amount of decent, affordable housing. And a project might be funding for the development of new residential housing. That could be single-family or multifamily. Another project example could be rehabilitation of existing housing stock. So the activity here might be to assist with the acquisition of property for development of multifamily housing. Why would you do acquisition? It's because even though it's a housing and urban development program, we can't build houses with the money. We can do things that support the building of houses. Each activity, again, must meet one of the national objectives. And when you're looking at the low moderate income national objective, you can look at that as an area, as limited clientele, housing, and in some cases with jobs. So an area benefit would be a park that isn't a regional park or a city-wide park, but it would be a park in a low moderate income area with a clearly defined service area that you might do upgrades to. That's how area benefit would work. The most common objective, again, is low moderate income. At least 51% of the program beneficiaries must meet that standard. HUD defines low income as 50% of area median income and moderate as 80%. New numbers have just come out, and as of May 1st, a family of 4 would be considered moderate income if they earn, or lower, if they earn less than about $84,000 in Minot. So if you have a multifamily structure that you're supporting the development of, or public facilities, including infrastructure, you must guarantee that at least 51% of the beneficiaries are low to moderate income. If you have single-family development, so if you're supporting the development, acquisition of a lot that's subdivided into 5 single-family lots for low moderate income homeownership, 100% of those families must meet that qualification. And no project is eligible if it doesn't. Local program usage caps. There is a cap on the public services, and we'll get to what those are in a few moments. There's a cap on public services of 15% of the entitlement amount. That is about $49,000 for this year. Planning and admin cap is 20%, so that's about $66,000. Eligible public services include, but are not limited to, services for the homeless, drug abuse, counseling and treatment, domestic violence services, child care, services for seniors, and a list of other services. These are very commonly used for public services. Again, the majority of service activities are affiliated with low mod income, national objective. Low to moderate income clientele, 51% must meet the income eligibility, and you're collecting income documentation in these programs and calculating income and assets. There are presumed benefit populations, and those are elderly, homeless, domestic violence victims, that's most often where that's used. There's a longer list in that category. They are presumed to be low to moderate income, so services that only serve those populations could be presumed to benefit low, moderate income residents. Things that are eligible: acquisition for housing or public facilities or other eligible purposes. You have to have an end goal. You can't just acquire land. There's no land banking. Clearance of sites, reconstruction or rehabilitation of homes and other public facilities, construction of new public facilities, and assistance to home buyers are examples of eligible activities. Completely ineligible activities include anything that you do with the buildings used for the general conduct of government, general government expenses, and any political activities. Generally ineligible would be purchase of equipment, and there are reasons behind that. And that is that the program then owns that equipment, and that equipment can never be used for any other purpose outside of program purposes. And you have to track it all the way through to disposition. So HUD just says don't do that, because that doesn't make a lot of sense for our, already understaffed nonprofits and other organizations. Operating and maintenance expenses. So, low mod area, you can upgrade a park. You can't pay to mow the lawn or to replace the mulch under play structures. No operating and maintenance expenses. And generally ineligible is construction of new permanent residential structures. And then you can't write checks to people. So that's a very brief overview. This is different. CDBG entitlement programs are very different than DR and NDR, which have a lot more flexibilities. And those flexibilities are given disaster by disaster, basically, to meet the needs of the community. So this is a much more prescriptive HUD program. And are there any questions about things that may or may not be eligible? No? Okay. Then I'm going to jump right into Thank you. Okay, we had, yes. I'd have to look at that. Some are significantly higher than that, and some are definitely lower. So this is, I can tell you from some of the communities that I work with that you have one of the higher income levels for a 4-person family. Pardon? That's actually not taken into consideration when they're doing that equation. So HUD has, how much you get is determined as, HUD does 2 calculations every year for every entitlement community, and then you get the best one for you. There is a YouTube video. It's riveting. It is absolutely not riveting, but I always tell people, HUD tells you how much you get, and that's how much you get. Yes. Right. Well, it would be if 110 and change is standard, and then 80 and change, I think it's 50 and something. Yeah, 56,000, something like that. Yeah. And there's a calculation that they do for 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, all the way up through 8. And then they have, like, if you have more than 8, you just add this much money. So, yes. Nope. But HUD makes you plan like you do. And just to make it as challenging as possible for the communities that receive the money, HUD makes you plan as though you will receive $331,580 every year for the next 5 years. You will not. Could go up, could go down. I have clients who both went up and went down this year, so it's a determination that they make on housing stock, age, poverty, things like that. So, and it's never exactly the same. Any other general program? Yes. Mhm. You can find it on the HUD Exchange. Why don't we post it on the CDBG? Yep. 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 So the new income levels just became effective for CDBG on May 1. And yeah, and they change every year. And we've seen, and those go up and down, interestingly enough. For a long time, they just went up. In the last couple years, we've seen a number of them go down. So, any other general questions? So I will give you, CDBG is a program that Congress allocates funding for every year. And communities choose or choose not to take part in the entitlement program process. If they don't, the money goes to other entitlements. So it really is something that is appropriated by Congress. And then if you're eligible to receive the money, it's basically like you get a grant award every year, which is nice to be directed by the community for the most critical needs. So we had 2 stakeholder sessions yesterday, and I am going to jump into some of the things that came out of those as the most pressing unmet needs in Minot. And then I definitely want input on things I've missed, things the stakeholders missed, and other things that we should put up there. So. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So agencies working on the ground in the city, providing services. Thank you for that clarification. I forget that not everyone speaks HUD language. So as far as housing goes, these are always the things that come up, that there's never enough affordable housing in a community. And multifamily for rentals usually tops that list. And then housing for seniors, rental housing for seniors, because homeownership doesn't consider senior or not senior, is usually right up there with that. And then homeownership model, affordable housing for the folks who live here, who want to own a home but can't, usually comes up in any community. So as you're thinking about this, are there priorities? Are there things that any of you see as the most pressing on that list? Yeah.
They also have a 20-year affordability period, which means for the next 20 years, they're required to have full 55 and plus, so to offer that to those citizens. There are other projects around the city, Park South 2, the townhomes behind Park South are for some seniors. Cook's Court has some senior living, and those were recipients of some DR fundage as well. So seniors, yes, that is a population that's presumed and something that is a need that has been identified through yesterday's stakeholder sessions.
And in housing, seniors have to income qualify. They're not just presumed to qualify for low to moderate income housing. They do have to income qualify. In some communities, housing is not the greatest need that the money goes to. And we're just talking about the buckets that we came up with yesterday and talked about with agencies and organizations. Any other thoughts on housing? Yes. So affordable multifamily rental, senior rental, or homeownership model housing. Yeah, I just didn't write affordable 3 times. My handwriting isn't that good, so. 30% of someone's income is typically what's considered as affordable. In Minot, from the data, and we're using CHAS and ACS data, and I will use the most updated in narrative, but HUD auto-populates the data that they have, and that data is 2016, 2020 CHAS data. The segment of the population here with the greatest housing need are low, very low. Folks who earn under 30% of area median income have the biggest challenges and most often are paying more than 50% of their income to housing. Now, when we think about that, those are the segments of our population who can't pay 50% and still pay for groceries and car insurance and a vehicle or other transportation. There are plenty of high earners who could pay 50% of their income and still pay for all of those things. And it's the renters who are primarily burdened. Anything else before we go on? Okay. And you're going to get a chance to put your thoughts up here because we want to capture that. For public services, maybe I'll jump over to public facilities and infrastructure first, because then when I go back over there, it will make more sense. Public facilities, by far, the agency stakeholders and the service providers in the community said a year-round option for shelter for families, women, and men is absolutely the highest priority. Sidewalks to promote safe passage. And I know there is Safe Routes to Schools here in Minot that is doing a lot of that work with grant funding. And also a resource center where all the nonprofits might be able, or some, or many, not all probably, that would be quite aspirational, but where a lot of nonprofits could come together and meet clients at the same place in one location, sharing, maybe a community waiting room and having office space there. What are we missing from public facilities and infrastructure that you see as really pressing needs? Yes? From a social service pot of money? What would that look like? What kinds of services are you thinking? So there are a lot of members of the community who have barriers to attaining housing, maybe a criminal background, credit scores, and issues that preclude them from gaining access to rental housing in the way that you or I might. And they may not have the resources to be housed, and there often are not enough vouchers or other resources to go around to meet the needs of the homeless or at risk of homeless in communities. And there are resources, but they are all limited too. What we heard yesterday is that these agencies have limited budgets. They're doing the best they can with what they have, with the budgets that they have, and the ability to serve the people that already come through the doors. They're struggling to get staff. They're struggling to get funding. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, I'm going to jump back over to public services. Shelter services, again, was absolutely number one, but you can't help pay for staff in a shelter if you don't have a shelter. So that they were aware of that. This is down the road. When we have one of those, we would need help potentially with staffing that shelter. The next biggest issue that folks identified, no matter what kind of agency or organization they work with, was mental health services, which led right into addiction services. And then childcare. Available and affordable childcare. Because residents in the city, like around the country, are struggling to find affordable and available childcare. Are we missing something really critical up here as far as public services go that you see as unmet needs in the community? Okay. Last, but not least, is the analysis of impediments information. So as I'm putting together the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, we look at the 7 federal protected classes. Those are race, religion, national origin, color, familial status, sex, and disability. I've worked in communities where 4 of these are issues in attaining housing. I've worked in communities where 1 of these are issues. I've worked in communities where, all of them might be. But looking at the needs of the protected classes, and primarily as it relates to low and moderate income residents in Minot. I want you to think about if you know of, have heard of, have read a story about, or had a neighbor talk to you about an issue with, or if you have experienced discrimination as a protected class in housing. And it can be as a homeowner or a renter. So one community that we worked with, there were landlords who very clearly said, we don't rent to single moms. Oh, sorry, that's not what we do. Thanks. They paid a lot of money to settle that claim because that's not acceptable. We heard that there are incidents of discrimination across at least a few of these lines that likely happen in Minot. Does anyone have any stories, or has anyone experienced discrimination in housing? That is very fortunate. So, very fortunate. And
about a gentleman who went to apply for an apartment, and they asked for first month's rent, last month's rent, and so basically 3 months' rent. And he could come up with that. However, he got a call the next day from his management company and said, I took this to the board and they want a full year's rent up front because of a credit rating score. So what type of, one, how humiliating for him, and who's got a year? Even someone with an 850 credit score, do you have a full year's rent? So that was a story that really resonated in my head, as there is that discrimination for credit scores as well as these protected classes as well. So that's a struggle that the Housing Authority and the agencies run into on a daily basis as well.
And we do address some affordable housing issues in the analysis of impediments, but that is not the majority of what that is about. It is about protected classes. We look at complaints and resolution of complaints, and every state has them, almost every community has them, and it's looking back to see what the predominant complaints were about. And unfortunately, credit score is not something that any of the fair housing boards will have information about, although they may. Legal services definitely does. And these are the items that we look at. Would anyone have thoughts about what is the most likely to be happening in Minot as far as discrimination of protected classes? Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's very common. And testing should be the norm rather than the exception in locations, because how do you know that you need to change something unless you know? And that's great that you never had an issue when they came in to test. That's not always the case. So definitely not always the case. And that happens a lot around service animals. And it happens a lot when people question, is that really a service animal? Which you cannot do. That is not allowed. And it happens because many landlords don't allow pets. I mean, just cut and dry. You know, some of these issues are because, you know, I like my pets. If you have pets, you probably like your pets. And people will do what they can to keep their pets. So, any thoughts on what you would like to see funded, what you think are the greatest unmet needs, what you would like to see funded in Minot?
That's a good question, Mike. Depending on how the facilities, who manages the facilities, that can be written into the contract. I know we've had some individuals who have come in with certain nonprofits and saying, here's the type of services we would like to offer in addition to not only housing, but what can we do for resume building, for job, for mental health, for substance abuse? So those types of projects would be a great fit. Will it happen? We'll find out, but we're confident that we have enough organizations in town that provide those types of services that could benefit from the Broadway Circle project.
So from your perspective, knowing the situation there and surveying that, is that the kind of project, just to kind of get it in my mind, is that the kind of thing that we should be thinking of?
Remember, we have that 15% cap. So when we look at the services that we have, you know, we need to be strategic with that. And if Broadway Circle fits that, and remember, every year we'll be looking at an action plan in the buckets. And so there could be Broadway Circle, whoever takes that, it could be domestic violence. So they would submit a plan, an RFP on what type of services that they would provide. And then the committee would review them and then allocate the award for them.
Are there any questions?
Wasn't a question from online. The Minot Area Recovery Community Organization, they said affordable rentals for individuals and families with a history of substance use disorder, which typically also comes with a criminal history.
Yeah.
That's just one thing we'd like to see.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely heard that a lot, that folks with high barriers to housing are really, really struggling. So thank you for sharing that. Anything else from online? Okay. Then I think we can leave them up here and folks can come and grab them. And I would love it if you would come up and just spend a few minutes writing your thoughts. These are anonymous. Like, I will turn my back. I'm not going to know who writes what. Honestly, I won't remember tomorrow anyway. So I would love it if you would come up and grab one of these and just put some of your thoughts up. And I will move the top ones of each of the pads over to the sides. And please just write your thoughts, maybe something that you see as a priority in multifamily housing. If we could prioritize this type of housing, that would be great. Public services, public facilities, your input is really, really important. And anyone online, just send it in, and we will capture that for sure.
Ultimately, City Council will give the final approval, but it would be myself, Community Development, Brian Billingsley. Will be on that. City Manager possibly someone from legal, so we make sure we have all of the proper additions to the contract that HUD requires. And then there may be an outside entity from one of the, a nonprofit or something that's not really involved with it, who hasn't submitted or may not have a service that we could provide that will help us evaluate. We will have a scoring criteria as to how we will score submissions for that.
So TBD, not yet, not yet built. And if there is a scoring criteria, it has to be objective. So it will be whoever scores the highest. You can have priorities. If we prioritize, this is why it's important to get feedback on prioritizing some of the public services, because you can prioritize what you'll accept applications for. And that's really important for a community that is only going to have year over year about 45,000 plus or minus to spend on public services. You would never want to give 9 nonprofits $5,000 because you are not doing them a favor with the federal requirements that they are required to meet. They are significant, and you want to make sure that you can have an impact. You can have an impact on the program too. So thoughts on those and any of the others, please come up and leave that. You don't have to put your name on it. And we really want the feedback. Any other questions before I start putting things in different places? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. CDBG, so I've known Brian for a number of years, and I worked with Brian when he worked in Caldwell, Idaho, and I wrote their first and second consolidated plan and ran their program for a number of years. And that is a community that has taken a small amount of money, always between 400,000 and 500,000, a little bit more than Minot, but not that much, and translated that into over 150 units of multifamily housing for low, moderate income in a 6-year period because they leveraged funds with state home funds that the developers could get, with low-income housing tax credits, with other state opportunities that came out. It really is about leveraging and being strategic to meet the needs of the community. So a tiny little bit of money can go a long way. And some of those projects, I mean, CDBG put in $20,000 to $100,000 and was able to, $20,000 to $100,000, was able to leverage, in some cases in each development, 30 to 50 plus units. And leveraged money for homeownership model housing during that same time and put 30 households, approximately 30 households, maybe not quite that many, but approximately 30 households into homeownership model housing that they now have pride of ownership in through a small investment. So this money, and also if there are other opportunities from the government to build shelter or build public facilities, this is the perfect opportunity to leverage that fund. So, thanks, Brian. All right, I'm gonna put these around. Get to work. I appreciate everyone who came out tonight and everyone who was online. If you have thoughts or ideas, I know how I work. I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning after I hear something and go, but wait, what about? Please reach out to Chris here at the city and or Anthony, and both of them would love to hear input and ideas. So, yes, yep, appreciated. Thank you.